Hello and welcome to the next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
And my name's Kevin Appleby. Well, Graham, we've talked on many occasions about investing on this podcast,
Hmm.
but one element of investing is the tax bill that results out of that. And well, it's very difficult to have a podcast on that because the tax bill is different in every country. But today we have some experts from the United States.
Yeah, we do. Their company is 1031 Specialists. I'm sure we'll find out what that is in a minute. But today's guest is Jeff Bemis, and he's one of the founders of 1031 Specialists. Jeff, welcome to the next 100 Days podcast.
Oh, awesome. It's amazing to be here, gentlemen, and I appreciate you having me.
You were raised in Newport Beach, which I
Right.
actually had the pleasure of being in. And I think you've been over there as well, haven't you, Kevin? So basically, Southern California, but where are you now?
I'm in that same area. I'm in a town called Laguna Niguel, which is just south of it for those who are the major landmark is Los Angeles. I'm kind of in between Los Angeles and San Diego with a little bit closer to Los Angeles.
Oh, right.
So it's yeah, my father moved there in the 70s. There wasn't much there and things have changed a lot over the last
Yeah, well,
50 years.
I would
So
imagine that over the, I'm always cautioned against saying things like this, but basically, until very recently, you probably had a stream of people going right by your house, didn't you, every day? Like going, don't know where they were going, but they were going right by your house.
it's
But
yeah.
maybe not
I
anymore.
was probably one of those in the past. I remember well a holiday where we stayed on the outskirts of Los Angeles, did all those Hollywood type things, but one day we
Absolutely.
drove down the state to do San Diego Zoo.
Ah.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean it's a great I certainly can't complain. It's a really amazing place and yeah, there's certainly lots and lots of tourists in the summertime and I always welcome them with open arms and I enjoy seeing how much fun they're having. Sometimes you lose sight of how much fun your backyard is when you're living there and doing your daily activities and so it's pretty cool.
But your day-to-day activities are all to do with tax. I mean you probably don't get a chance to talk about it when you're at parties because you've learned. But presumably it's a fascinating area. So let's sort of take. We don't know much. Kevin knows a lot, but I don't really know much.
I wouldn't go very far on tax.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm
Well,
still waiting for the letter to drop through the door from the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales that says, "Dear Kevin, we've just been reviewing your tax exam in the finals and realised that we made a mistake and you never passed it."
yeah.
That about sums up my application to tax.
They got rid of they
Still
got
to this
the
day do not know
Kevin, don't
how
worry.
I
They got rid of your paper records about 40 years ago. Don't worry about it. So,
So
but no, seriously. Jeff, when it comes to tax help, first of all, who are your clients?
So our clients in particular are real estate investors in the United States.
Got
And in particular, we have a very focused business. It's in our name, it's 1031 specialist. There's in the Internal Revenue Service, which is, the IRS in the United States, which is in charge of collecting the tax related to income and gains made by citizens. The there's a code section called 1031. So 1031 of the code section is why it's called that. And it's such a used code section. It's been around for 100 years and it effectively allows you to defer your tax on real estate transactions. So as an example, if you want to swap real estate, so if I have an investment property and I sell it and I have a lot of built-in gain. Now, keep in mind with real estate, you can depreciate the property and offset current income, and you can adjust your what's called tax basis much lower and get a lot of tax benefits from that. But if you sold it and you've had an appreciating property, you would have a lot of gain on that sale. If you reinvest that into another investment property, subject to a number of rules and considerations, but effectively sell one, buy another quickly, you can defer all that tax. You pay zero tax on any of the gains you have, which is unlike any other financial investment. And again, this is just for the United States underneath United States tax law. But effectively, if you sold stock, as an example, if you sold stock at a gain and but sold Coca-Cola stock, bought IBM stock, and one had a gain and the other you just buy, you would pay tax. Same with any other kind of financial instrument. So it's unique.
Well, now that Donald's changed the Coca-Cola drinks formula,
Exactly.
it's time to
Yeah.
invest. It's time to.
You're
But no,
right.
we'll park that for a minute. But if I get you right, this is a well. How come they've allowed this to go? What is it? What benefit does I don't know whether it's California or whether it's the United States as a whole? What benefits does the country get by allowing this sort of
Yeah.
reinvestment to defer? It's a good investment, so let's not pay any tax on it.
I mean, the idea historically, and this is going back a long time, and certainly there are merits to the consideration of policy on whether, this should or shouldn't exist. And I think that's a reasonable sort of thing for people to debate. But the,
Mm,
the original is for folks who have farmland in particular, and this is going back a long time, right? Is we wanted to encourage folks to expand and or move to other areas to increase the productive use of the land across the United States. So that's sort of the initial impetus, was to give a mechanism for the folks who are great farming operators an
yeah,
ability to go move into other areas that the country wanted them to. That's sort of like long, long history ago. There's been other elements of trying to incentivize folks to reinvest into real estate in other areas, create in combination with other tax benefits, develop areas that maybe are underserved. And so it's created this policy of, look, you will pay the piper in theory eventually. It's like it just defers the tax. Like if you make more and more gains and then you ultimately sell, you'll pay the tax then.
and
But
how
let's
much? How
how
much?
much? So yeah, it depends on where you live in the United States. So when you sell real estate assets and you've held them over a year, you'd pay long-term capital gains on the real estate. And capital gains tax for many who own real estate is going to be at 20% at the federal level.
Right.
And then you're going to have state level tax depending on where you live. So if you live on the coast, they generally have California, New York has, 10+% tax. Other states have zero. And
Right.
then depending on how you operate your real estate, you'll have some recapture tax for benefits you've gotten historically,
Right.
depreciation recapture amongst others. So that your tax can be somewhere between 25 and 35% when you sell the real estate if you don't do something to defer it.
Coming from the United Kingdom, that sounds like a very generous sort of outcome. But having said, given that you've had the best years of your life paying no tax, and then of course you leave it for when you're 75 and you pay it, you don't really mind by then. But I don't know, is there a strategy to when you should pay the tax,
There
when you
is.
should divest? Because presumably you're advising people here.
Yeah, I mean, it's really an interesting dynamic, and this is just as by way of background, it, it's a strategy used by a very large number of people in the United States, and it's been a very effective tool to build wealth. There's
Yeah.
another thing that I should bring up in combination with your question. So number one, if you ultimately people are buying yielding assets in real estate, so a very common strategy is you just never really sell. Okay, and so you get a lot of tax benefits from your ability to depreciate the property.
Yeah.
Under the current tax regime, when you can do things to segregate the purchase price of the property between uh, assets that can be depreciated faster versus slower. And so in the new Trump tax bill, he reinserted accelerated depreciation. So
Yeah.
for parts of your property, you can depreciate the whole thing in year one to offset all of your income. So there's big strategies around that. Folks generally aren't big sellers, or they're just swapping with a 1031, and
Yeah.
they're holding and they have yielding assets that work well into their retirement. And then the last thing that is a really it's just it's a really effective tax tool is that there's a certain amount of your estate that is not taxed, the estate and gift tax in the United States. So under current tax policy, it's around $27 million worth of value can be inherited by your children or your heirs, I should say, when
Yeah.
you pass away. So if you're somebody who builds all this real estate, defers all the tax with the real estate, whenever all of our time comes, you leave it to your family. In the United States, a very large amount of money can be passed down to your family, and they get what's called a step up in basis. So if you have this very low basis, let's say you bought property for $1 million and it's worth 20 million now. I'm making it up. You've held it for 70 years. That could eat some of that stuff happens in the United States with the last run up we've had over this last century. All of that will get inherited by your kids, and they will now inherit the new tax basis of the property. So if they get 20 million in value and they sold the next day for 20 million, they pay no tax. So if you're someone who owns it and you want to monetize, you will pay the piper whenever you monetize that asset, and that happens all the time with our clients. But many just hold it and create generational wealth that can, for the family and sets everyone up well into
I,
the future.
I guess it helps investors that the president is a property investor.
Agreed. I would say what even more than the president being a property investor is that real estate wealth, and this is across the world, is held by an older cohort. Okay.
Mm.
And so the people who vote are folks who are in the older cohort on a
Yeah,
percentage basis, if you look at the statistics.
yeah.
And so it's a very powerful group of people who want to see this incentive continue on. I think more than the policy of 1031s where you can defer tax and swap real estate, because ultimately you could pay the tax now and or pay the tax later, and I think you sort of end up in a reasonably neutral position if you're the government. The inheritance tax in combination, or the inheritance exemption in combination with the ability to defer tax in
Mm.
this way, does create a very it's a very it makes real estate a very, very attractive after tax investment option for folks.
I,
Yeah. I'm just contrasting this with some of the UK rules, which I must admit I haven't looked at in the sort of detail that Jeff knows the US rules. But where you've got 1031, we've got capital gains tax and something called rollover relief. And that works in much the same way as your 1031, that if you
Okay.
reinvest substantially all of the gain within a particular period, then you do get an exemption and you can carry it on. The big difference in over on this side of the pond is the inheritance tax level, where you've got that lovely figure of 27 million. In the UK, it's 300 and something thousand.
Yeah.
Or if it's a married couple, then their one person's allowance is passed on to the other. So effectively, the family estate becomes 600,000.
That is for a husband and wife that I was giving you that. So you'd have to divide that by two. And in fact, it's going up under the new Trump bill that just passed. So yeah, that's a big number for sure. It's
Big, big number.
relative.
I have
Yeah.
to admit that I rather like what you've got there in the United States, because when you've paid tax on it all your life, why should you pay tax on it again when you die?
yeah. Well,
It's
unfortunately,
yeah, go ahead.
you're fortunate not to have a socialist government, but unfortunately, we're not, and they're making an absolute horlicks of it. But what I would say though, Jeff, is that what I'm interested in is that you obviously are expert at this area. If you had to narrow it down, and you only had, say, three things that you could keep, what are the kind of well, I really need to keep the sort of strategy about offering advice about this tax deferred 1031. Is there anything else that you offer within your, is it just about 1031, nothing else? Or is it
Yeah.
basic? Do you have more streams that bring you income in?
Yeah, so just a little about our business. So I started my career as a CPA working for a global firm called Ernst& and Young, and I from there I went and worked in finance for a very long time. My dad's a tax attorney and so is my brother. And so I've been around different tax dynamics and strategies my whole career. We focus on 1031 exchanges now in the United States as part of this 1031 exchange dynamic. You must use what's called a qualified intermediary to execute it. So, our business helps clients issue spot and figure out, how to comply with Section 1031. And then when you sell your relinquished property, those proceeds must be held by the intermediary while you're doing the exchange.
Yeah.
And then so we safeguard those funds. And then ultimately, when you buy your replacement property, we utilize those funds and help and prepare all the paperwork and sort of aid our clients in developing everything they need so that they qualify for the tax deferral. As far as like us being a broader CPA firm, that isn't actually what we do specifically. I know a lot of different things about a lot of tax related elements, but as far as what we do, we become specialists in this one area because we're required to, this is a requirement by law to be
So
utilized.
are you like a notary in a sense that you basically have a legal status in those transactions, in the advice about those transactions, that and especially as you're holding the transaction at some stage. So is that the point, that you have a huge amount of responsibility between, well, parties, presumably the parties are the tax people on one side and the owner of the property and trying to sell it on the other. So is that your experience? Is that where you're taking your money from? Is that experience that you've
Yeah, I mean,
nothing
if you can think about this, the situations get pretty involved surrounding real estate, how people have things structured and organized and otherwise. And there's a lot of layers of rules around 1031 exchanges and how that gets executed on. So, as far as our role, I would say it has a similar-ish feel to escrow,
Yes.
but escrow sort of held in the United States, escrow is the one who holds the funds from all parties,
Yeah.
gathers all the documents. Once everything has gotten exactly where it needs to be and the
Yeah.
transaction has closed, they record the real
Yeah.
estate transaction and release all the funds and closing statements and sort of are the middleman to facilitate an actual closing.
Yeah.
We are separate in that we're a facilitator of our client's exchange. So we sit outside of escrow, but it's similar to that if I
Mm.
were to sort of analogize it.
Yeah. Mm.
And yeah, so we're very important in the transaction. There's a number of documents that need to be done. There's a number of structural elements that need to be done. And if you think about this, there's a lot of nuance in and around how if you have a bunch of partnerships, if you have GP interests, if you have certain structural elements in how your real estate is held, it makes it more complicated on how to execute. If you're selling a business that has components of real estate, if you have different sort of sub elements of the real estate that represent personal property versus real property, how do you analyze that, deal with that? And we help our
Mm.
clients issue spot all those things. And then obviously they have advisors as well who are advising them on the transaction typically. And
Yeah.
so we work in concert with them to get it done. But ultimately, our role is required by the government to execute on a 1031 exchange. And they like it as well, this is my opinion, because there's another party who exists in the
Mm.
transaction that they can get
Yeah.
information from. In some states, we actually withhold tax in certain things, in certain circumstances. So they have another person who isn't the taxpayer that they can go to and say, hey, by the way, you're now required to withhold tax so that we get it paid up front instead of waiting for a taxpayer to pay us at the end of the year, et cetera. So
Mm. So quite an important role that you're playing, and presumably quite lucrative. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, you're living in a posh state. Well, it was, I suppose. I mean, it's the equivalent of living in, well, Newcastle, I suppose, nowadays, isn't it? I mean, it's you know
I
got
don't know. I think there are certain benefits that of living in California that
no,
outweigh.
they have the sun. Newcastle
They've
don't have that.
still got the weather, Graham, even if they've got all left wing.
No, seriously though, I mean, it's a beautiful state. So basically, from that point of view, there's large margins to be made, presumably, because I can't imagine you're thick on the ground. I mean, you'll probably have competitors, but you won't have that many, will you?
it's a real niche business in general, I'd say, versus a broader accounting firm who would
Yeah.
have lots and lots of competitors, doing that. This
Yeah.
has definitely a far smaller amount of players. There's certainly competition. It's not without folks competing with us. And I would say, it's like any business, whether it's lucrative, not lucrative, gets into execution
Yeah.
and there's competition. So it's not like our fees aren't being, compared, and we need to be inside of the marketplace. We sort of pride ourselves on setting this up to be really, really efficient. We've got a team, inside of the company now that I think is just top of the line. It makes up, we're almost up to a couple hundred years now of real estate experience inside of the team. We've got about 90 years of exchange experience specifically, and some really great talent inside of our firm. And so being efficient for our clients, having systems and processes makes the business work, and makes it so that we can be profitable. But
Yeah.
certainly, there's, as an example, attorneys could do this as a side business, be a qualified intermediary, and you need to have the systems, process, infrastructure to be somebody who's dedicated to this component. And for most of them, it's not worth it. So yeah, we think it's a great
I,
business. That's why we're doing it. But
I
yeah.
one of the things I spend my time doing is helping people with the AI agents, and I'll ask you the AI question because this last week or so we've had Grok 4 come out, and it's had some stupendous results. And it strikes me that, and I don't know if it struck you, that something like a Grok 4 could probably pick up what you're doing in relatively short order and do it better, or not. What do you say?
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. Just by way of background, we built our own dedicated AI tool to answer 1031 exchange questions, and it's built up of the entirety of the 1031 IRS guidance, supplemental guidance,
Yeah,
revenue rulings, anything else, plus our own structural things that we've uploaded into the data set, amongst other things around case law, et cetera.
yeah,
Because in general, we were like, okay, like how do the big AI tools work for this area? And the answer is they give a lot of, they're okay in some regards, and then there's a lot of erroneous answers. When you get into this technical field, we felt
yeah.
like we needed something dedicated, so we did build that. So that exists on our website at 1031specialist.com, and the answers are amazing. Okay, and we think, you know, we always encourage people to consult their CPA or attorney, supplement what we're providing. But we think that's incredible. So that's one example of what we're doing.
Yeah.
And the industry in general is a little bit of a laggard with respect to using tech, and we view ourselves as a tech forward firm that is trying to stay on the forefront. The interesting part, though, Graham, is that it real estate in the United States is going to be a big late adopter of a lot of these things. So much is around, and because of the cohort of the people who own the real estate, if I directed them to our chat tool, which has
Yeah.
really good answers. And by the way, when I answer questions, I always type it in just to see if it has something else to say about things, which it often does. Like, oh, I wouldn't have thought about mentioning that. Okay, as an example,
Mhm.
our clients don't aren't comfortable with that yet,
Yeah.
right? There's a cultural dynamic that has to fill in with the AI dynamic. I think it'll happen pretty quickly once it becomes very
Yeah.
understood how good these things are. But as it sits today, real estate transact is very personal in its relationship dynamics. Why isn't, real estate should probably be on the blockchain already for how title and everything transfers, so that, title insurance premiums probably could go way down, as an example, if you really had tech everywhere.
Yeah.
But counties are where you record things in the United States. They don't have tons of incentive to go overly, make their infrastructure super tech. And ultimately, all of this would benefit real estate investors. It would lower fees, it would make it more efficient. But the infrastructure is not particularly set up for it. But I will tell you how we're running our business, how we're working with getting the message out. 1031 exchanges are really a tool for everyone, and a lot of folks aren't knowledgeable about it. So we're using tech to get the message out, how we're thinking about marketing, building content. All of that are the places that I think right now are very, very relevant, is using tech to be really efficient, get more efficiency out of the people on our team. But as
Yeah.
far as the things that I think some other industries have the ability to take advantage of, I think real estate, and particularly because of the cohort who owns it, is
I
going
don't.
to be a slower adopter.
I. I kind of agree with you, but I having said that. if I was a young whippersnapper from EY, and I'd left, and I thought, oh, this 1031 thing sounds like a nice. Oh, you know what? I can knock up a super agent in the next 3 days, and bingo, I'm in business. So I'm
But
still.
are you in business, Graham?
I
Like
don't
this is the
know. I
joke. Like
that's but this is
it's the old joke I have that my father tells. What's the difference between a lawyer and an attorney? And an attorney has clients. So like this, it needs to have a dynamic of, okay, you're going to ask somebody to give you $2 million of their money, and you're going to hold it. And is the super agent and your tech infrastructure, which I'm sure can be built to be where it needs to be as far as the actual execution, is somebody going to trust you with that if they can't understand the person behind it and the team behind it? I would just say right now it's a tougher sell, but
I'm
I'm not
I'm
saying it's
with
not
you.
available.
No, that's a really good answer, because basically I kind of like the way in which you're working with this. You've built your own version to help supplement your answers, but you're still in the middle there, and you're still all about relationships. And I'm looking at part of your site here, and you've got brokers, you've got strategic partners, you've got influencers, and you're thinking about marketing and so forth, because so many people don't know about it. You're doing, you're making it harder for the young EY whippersnapper to come along and eat something off your plate. Um, but I'm just thinking that your industry is not immune, and other industries will face the same fate in
Totally.
some ways. And
Yeah.
but it's what is really interesting to me is exactly how 1031 specialists will slow down the pace of competitive incursion because of AI. Because presumably you're thinking about it. And if you're not,
Oh,
well,
we're completely thinking about it, and we're trying to develop new tools and new ways that we can provide answers. I would just it's an interesting thing, and I view it as similar to CPA firms and law firms. Okay, what for law firms in particular, and this will be really interesting. It'll be really interesting in the next 15 years across the globe. I mean, probably law school footprints have to shrink because
mm,
a partner does not need 10. If you're at a very large firm, and I've talked with my attorneys who are big litigators about this, and just because I think it's a fascinating moment in time. I think for me, the very clear path in service industries, especially ones that are CPAs, attorneys, similar ilk, is you the research of an associate, you've
mm,
10x them overnight. Okay, right now, like if you're at a massive law firm that does big litigation matters, you need the same level of partners.
mm,
Ultimately, you're still litigating in front of your peers or a judge, and that sort of high level needs to exist. But the research associates who are doing all the briefs, writing all the you know the briefs and other documents that you need, and doing all the legal research, which used to be a very challenging, task to go get accomplished. That is happening. One is doing the job of 10, and it probably gets even more scaled than that. And so you don't need to hire as many. So, but you
yeah,
do
yeah.
need the person. Okay. And that is evident. Um,
That hollers out the future partners.
it does. That is
And,
the thing I
and
talk
that's the
about.
problem, isn't it? It is
Yes.
a real dire, because
Yes.
my
Yeah.
daughter's in the legal profession, so I can see that as a real problem. But these are the issues of our time. I mean,
Yeah.
Kevin, go
And
on.
this is true not just in the legal profession, it's true across professional services.
Hmm,
I'm doing
Yes.
stuff in my line of work, writing white papers and the like, which I'm doing things that when I would have done those within the big four, you'd have had a team of analysts doing the research. I can just get ChatGPT to do it in a fraction of the time. And my job is then sense checking it to say, is it right? Is this the right level of detail? And then pulling the research together as I'd always have done, but it's come out of a machine rather than a team of 4 or 5 analysts. So where is the next generation of me or you coming from, Jeff? Because there's going to be such a small pool of people to choose from.
It's going to be really interesting. And I don't know the answer to that. And I think that is why there's a lot of debate about, policy. I mean, we're gonna get down a rabbit hole because I've thought a lot about this. But there's a lot of folks who are thinking about this where, okay, where are people going to, where are humans needed in our global economy, and where is it replaced? If you combine robotics and AI, arguably in the next 100 years, a lot of things can be done without a human, right? And so then it becomes a real interesting societal dynamic of how do you distribute that? It's a productivity game changer. It's a wealth creator on an aggregate basis. And then it's just how does that wealth get distributed? Is it all to six people, or is there a mechanism that redistributes? I mean, it's all a very fascinating and interesting debate. And right now, I would say what I like to do is because I can get down a real rabbit hole with all of that is number one, we stay focused on using tools and being more efficient than everyone else around you because most people are not using these tools and being forward thinking on it. That is the truth. Okay. And then number two, what is right in front of us that are the big things? And our people are doing so much more, are getting so much smarter, and are furthering themselves in such a faster clip because we're doing that to support them that I think they end up in a good spot. But I think I need to challenge myself as an example. A friend of mine just talking about what he's doing software wise, and he didn't come from a software background. I think these are places that average folks big, can make big moves with what they're doing personally. And this, obviously 70% of the US economy is small business by being someone who really gets on the forefront of this because there's going to be a transition period that will be longer than people think of adoption, comfort. And in our business, just I talk with clients like I get the same question most of the time, questions, and I'm
Sure.
more than happy to answer it because I'm totally interested in seeing my client comfortable with what they're doing. It's a lot of their net worth. It's big money and important stuff, and they want to know that someone's watching out for them, which I am. But these questions are answerable with technology that we have too. And this sort of brings me back to okay, there's a humanistic element to this that I think is a really interesting dynamic to be considered of.
I couldn't agree more. I'm talking about humans in your firm. We were about to meet John Hilly, who's your partner. I think I've spelled his. I don't know, is it Hilly or Hiley? I mean,
Hilly, yeah, you
Hilly.
got it correct.
Anyway, the thing about John, he's a very bright chap, and he'd have been a brilliant guest. Now, as it happens, you're better, but I mean, how do you cope with somebody who basically had the highest honors from Florida University and he worked at Goldman Sachs, and there's the word hedge fund in his bio. I mean, obviously a bright chap. The combination of you being bright, him being bright, the whole idea of this is that you've got a heck of a team. What is it that John brings that complements you?
Yeah, John's a talented guy, and that's partly why we're working together. As we met a number of years ago, I worked as a portfolio manager at a hedge fund for a period of time, and so John and I um, uh, through different events that we were both going to, met each other, became friends, stayed in contact. We both were sort of making a change in our careers to do something a little bit different. I wanted to build something, and he was in a similar spot, and we'd always been chatting. And so, yeah, we found ourselves together like, hey, let's go build this together. And I'd been exposed to it. We were working on a project that it was sort of ancillary to this space and got reacquainted with it and just really felt like we could do something better and different. You know, how we complement each other. I mean, he's a really detail oriented and passionate guy, and he exemplifies the art of just getting things done. No time like the present. Something's in front of you. There's something to get done. Go get it done. And he's got such a breadth of knowledge, as do I do, because of all the places I've been. When I was investing in a lot of companies. I was doing up and down the capital structure. I was doing restructuring things. So I've had a lot of operational expertise aside from my CPA background. So all these things sort of complement each other. the experience I've brought to the table being in the number of companies I've invested in and analyzed and been a part of, and the same for him. And he has a little bit, the other thing that he brings to the table a little bit more than I do is he was an executive in several companies, whereas I was more on the investor side as sort of, board level kind of involvement. And so
Until you said that, Jeff, that I was thinking you were making the case for getting rid of him.
no,
But
no, 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 no. I would say quite the opposite.
no, I know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and he is very, very good at identifying areas that we should focus on, and a lot of the tech initiatives in particular are things that he really brought to bear. So, yeah, I think we're a great team,
Yeah.
we're both willing to roll up our sleeves, which is great, right? Like you want to work with somebody who wants to work hard, and just like I do, and
Has
we
he moved
exemplify
to
that.
California as well? Is he living there in California too?
He lives in Denver, Colorado.
Oh,
So
wow.
our firm, because we operate nationally in the United States, we've made the decision to be a firm that operates remotely. Sort of the post-COVID world is there's a lot of great talent, and if we can expand our willingness to not be all in one office, which has definite trade-offs. But we've done that. So he's in Denver, but we have folks in New York, Florida. We have a few in Denver, and we have a
Mm.
number of people in California. A lot of our operations team is in Southern California, but we all still work remote. And yeah, but we're with these great tools that you have now, and like just like what we're doing now, we think we're being effective with that strategy.
And you both have the responsibility of bringing clients.
Yeah, and we have a whole business development team now. So the
Wow.
firm has grown substantially. We've become one of the bigger operators in our space. And so we have a business development team. But yeah, John and I bring in clients ourselves. And uh, yeah, it's sort of wherever I meet people, my relationships, same with John. And then obviously we have a big outbound strategy of how we get the word out. I mean, I would say one last thing on that, Graham, is there's still a lot of white space in this. There's so much real estate held by individuals in the United States that aren't aware of or think it's a tool for someone else, or are just they aren't comfortable that they could defer tax if they wanted to change. And there's a million reasons, not a million, but there's a lot of reasons that
Yeah.
folks are wanting to change their portfolio. So
Yeah.
educating them is a big deal for us.
Wow, that alone is a topic for a separate podcast. But if you think that one through, the world, I mean, presumably you've done a bit of market analysis. If you said to yourself, how much white space really is there? I mean, you've obviously got clients and you've grown and there are
Yeah.
other competitors, but if you put the totality of that and it was in this big sort of circle, how much of that circle will be eaten up in terms of a solution, a 1031 solution being offered, as opposed to how many more 1031s are
Yeah, we,
being offered?
we think about 1 in 6 or 1 in 7
Wow.
investment property transactions are 1031ing. To give you a sense, it's a big marketplace.
Wow.
Okay,
Wow.
so real estate, so there a lot, and this is for again, 1031 exchanges are only for investment property, not for personal residence. We think it could be closer to 1 in 2 because there's certainly a lot of structural elements that either
Mm.
fund related owners who have non-tax entities that back them, endowments, foundations, et cetera, and or folks who are monetizing the asset just because for how they are managing their own retirement, et cetera. But
But
yeah,
isn't
it
that
should
what
go
you
from
said
one in
earlier?
seven to 1 in 2, probably.
But if isn't that what you said earlier? That basically one of the streams is those people who are potentially selling their business, and within that are investment properties.
That too. I mean, that is also an opportunity. So, it just depends. Again, we think the market should be multiples of what it is right now, and just looking at aggregate data. But
Mhm.
again, we'll see if that comes to bear. I think there's just, here's the also truth. I'm talking about in from a volumetric perspective, like on the numerosity of the actual transactions.
Yeah.
Large family offices that hold real estate, they are using this every time. I mean, I'm generalizing, but that is the case, right? So the family office who has 300 million in real estate assets, multi-generational wealth. You see those folks doing it almost every time.
Mhm.
And, and a lot of that, it lives inside of particularly multifamily and triple net lease style assets. I mean, most of those transactions that occur in that 0 to $50 million range are 1031 exchanges. So it's
Mm.
the folks who have this on a more institutional scale are understanding the benefits and using it like in a big way, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, our goal is I've been surprised more than I thought I would when I got into this business of just how much real estate is held by individuals. And they have a really great three property, $5 million, $6 million portfolio. And this is a perfect thing for them in different life stages, or they don't want to actively manage, or they want to diversify, or they want a lot of land gets inherited as no yield. So move out of
Yeah.
that. So
I don't know if you've considered the your 52nd state, is it, or the 51st, Canada. So basically, so
sure.
when you inherit Canada, have you looked at their rules? And presumably they have similar challenges.
I haven't focused on that just because we're working on the United States.
Mm.
So, but I'm certainly interested to understand how what we're doing can be leveraged to other areas of business in the world. There's so much space for us to be successful in what we're doing right in front of us, and I have this view of just from my where I've been of, just be really focused and then let just be patient around the things that get you off track because we're expanding pretty. We have big goals and big ambitions of what we can do with this business and how we can expand what we think is a really great and different product offering. And so we're focused on that mainly at the moment. But if there's opportunities that are similar to this
Mm.
beyond, we'll certainly look at those when the time's right.
Kevin, what's the question that I haven't asked?
I don't know. I think I'd bring this back to the name of our podcast, The Next 100 Days. And we've interviewed many corporate escapees. Jeff is a corporate escapee. And you can see this big successful business that's been developed. If you go back to that corporate escape, Jeff, is there anything you'd have done different?
Um, you know, it's interesting. I'll frame it a little differently. When I was working, I was working at Ernst& Young, which has, whatever, 150,000 people. And then I worked at a smaller account consultancy. And then I worked at a decently sized hedge fund and always inside of a bigger organization and successfully doing various roles that I was performing. I always felt like I would like, if I wanted to make a change, let's do something different and try and build something. So I tried to be really intentional about what I was doing, which was, when I was no longer in an office, I was commuting to my guest bedroom slash office in my house, and I said I gotta have a mission statement, and my mission statement was I want to work with people I like on transactions that excite me, and let's see if I can make that work, and let's put everything behind that. And it was that motivation that, some days I was like, wow, look at all these things that are happening. My network is really coming alive. There's a lot of different opportunities, things I can work on, which ultimately led us to this spot was something I was working on, and then sort of re-exposed to this area where I felt like, wow. And then it jived with my family's background. But the, the, the thing is that I thought that worked really well. There were some days where I looked out and I said, what am I doing? I did an entire day of phone calls and there's no prospects of what I'm doing right now. And so you're sort of like evaluating, okay, like what am I doing? And it was funny, my friends on the journey always, were poking fun at me and the like. But I was really happy with creating a little bit of infrastructure of what am I trying to do? And it was broad in its idea, but it was focused in, okay, I need to be talking to folks that I really like, people who I find really inspiring, and tell them that I'm looking to do some great things. And here's what I'm trying to do. I want to build things. I've raised capital in my career amongst other stuff. And so that I'm really proud of. Things I would do differently. There's certainly things I spent time on that didn't bear the fruit that I thought they would, whether it's before we really got going on this several years ago. Um, I was doing a few different things and spent too long a time on things that I think
Mm.
had became apparent had too remote a possibility to fulfill what I thought they could be. And so those are the things that I would have as advice for anybody who was trying to do what I did and have the same idea I did, which was I have a very broad background. I can do a lot of interesting things. So with
Yeah.
that, click some noise outside of my
I
my
was going to
building.
interject at that point,
Yeah,
Jeff, because
go ahead.
basically, I saw 2 days ago an AI agent that one of my colleagues, Bill, had built, and it was a business coach, and he exposed himself to this coach, and it was built on with a sort of Gary V type sort of response. And anyway, the thing is, he was one part of this. He was saying, "Well, I could do this, and I've got this other idea." He says, "Nope, stop, focus." And it's what you said earlier. One of the things I picked up on is that you said that you were focused. And I think for small businesses, and it was so interesting. And Bill, he admitted to almost being in tears at the end of it because he was really put through the mill. He's a lovely guy. He's a lovely guy, and he's doing really well. But the point is, this was real hard hitting advice, and it was asking for numbers and all that kind of stuff, and trying to figure out. "Oh, I've got this other idea." No, just wouldn't allow him to go off piste. So the it seems to me that part of your success has come because you've recognised that focus actually drives real value, and I think that not. I'm sure that's what's happened with
Yeah,
you.
and I've had advice in my career, and it sort of formed my view as an example of like non-disclosure agreements or sharing information. And I had someone that I really respected, sort of more of a venture capital style person, who told me, Jeff, 95% of any of this is in the execution.
Mhm.
And, there's a lot of great ideas. And so that I love that advice like completely. And so to have the execution you need to be as focused as you can. It doesn't mean that your focus can't expand into different areas that are adjacent to what you're doing and or even other things. It just needs to be something that you can be focused on. And right now, because of what's going on in front of us, we're focused on 1031 specialists and being a qualified intermediary. And it's interesting as you gain more success in it, more folks come to you talking about other things. And it's a definitely staying disciplined inside of that is really important. And I've seen that in folks that I've been, firms that I've invested in the past that have maintained that. I've seen that with people I respect who've had a lot of success, and I'm trying to replicate that for us.
You've been an extremely interesting, deep, thoughtful, open guest, and I want to thank you, Jeff, for being our guest today on the Next 100 Days podcast.
Well, we went into an area that's of particular relevance to any of our listeners in the USA, but
Hmm.
I think we have found a lot of lessons there that are applicable to anybody. You know,
Yeah,
how to grow a business in a niche, a very tight niche, and stay in that niche and become a majorly successful player in there.
yeah. I mean, there was um, towards the end there was some very interesting comments about the way in which he works with partners, introducers, and so forth. Really, really top-notch advice. But also, we talked about focus and he's really focused on 1031. If you think about it, it's a code, and that they understand deeply. But he's still using AI to supplement his own deep in understanding anyway. But this understanding of the blend of AI and how that complements what he does now, but also potentially creates future staffing issues to do with the throughput of people into senior roles and so forth. Fascinating in conversation, Kevin.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's a lot more to explore there, I think, over time, Graham.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've mined into a really rich seam, not just for us, but I think for those people listening who are a little bit bothered about the way this might impact. But I think there's hope there. I think there's some sense because if you understand the problems, then you can do something about them.
Exactly.
And I think they're onto something here.
Mm.
And it's been a great podcast. So
Yeah,
today,
the way that this podcast is evolving, we
yeah,
started off talking about general business problems, that this is what you might do in the next 100 days.
yeah.
We seem ever increasingly to be talking about, and here's what you can do with AI in the next 100 days.
Well, I can't help talking about the things I'm involved with, but and you with yours. But the I think deep down, I can see some of the things that he's talking about, that building the AI to supplement what he's doing. It's what we do every day for other people.
Mm.
So from that point of view, I think the where we would help 1031 would be to create that. Um, Solution on their site that enabled them to answer, that those people who are not aware, the ones who are aware, they're covered. But it's those people who are not aware of the solution that they should be involved. That for me is where they should be thinking about. And that for me would be an AI agent on their site. Anyway, Kevin, at that point, I've been Graham Arrowsmith.
I've been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.